Alright, I'm ready to glue the leg assemblies to the stretcher here. I got this all glued up. I've got the holes drilled for draw boring. Because this is a through tenon, I need to be careful how much glue I put on here. So I've got some glue just on the back of a piece of old sandpaper here. And I'm going to just carefully spread the glue on here. I think I want to do it from the inside of the joint, because I find that I get a little bit of glue squeeze out. It kind of comes out as I'm wiping it on here. I'd rather have it on the inside. Just getting enough glue there to get that surface a little bit wet. And I definitely want to get some glue. Normally I wouldn't worry about this, but I want to get some glue on the ends of the mortise, because when we put the wedge in, the tenon's going to be forced against that. So that normally would not be much of a glue surface, but in this case it is. So okay, and then I'll like with any tenon, I'll put glue on the surface here, just working it in to the surface, and a little bit on the edges of the tenon, just like before, or on the edges of the mortise, or ends of the mortise. I'm not sure what those are called. Okay, so that looks good. I'll put this in a vise. And I don't think it matters which way I put this. I'll just do it this way. So I'll slide that into place there. Make sure I'm down flat. So that looks good from that angle. And now I need to put the wedges in. So I want to make sure I've got a little bit of glue on the surfaces of the wedges. And make sure that's aligned there. Now, I really want to make sure this is down flat when you pound these in. You can hear the tone change when everything gets tight. That's a good sound. Goes there. Very nice. So those moved out nicely, filled up the mortise there. That still looks nice and tight. We're good to go. So, well, before I do that, I'm going to get a little bit of squeeze out off of here. That looks pretty clean. Didn't get much squeeze out, so that was good. Now, because this is a hand plane surface, if I get this wet, it is not going to raise the grain. That's one advantage of that. Okay, so that's good. We'll let that dry and then we'll trim that. So I'll turn this over here and we'll do the other side. All right, ready for the next step. The glue has dried on the tenon and the wedges, so I've got it clamped at a nice height here to work on. I'm going to saw the wedges off. I want to round this as opposed to getting it flush. If I want to get it flush, I would get a flush cut saw, cut it, and then just plane it flush. But we're going to get a nice look by rounding this. So I'm going to use my chisel. And it's a little tricky to do this because it's difficult to do much of this work with the bevel up. A lot of it's going to have to be done bevel down. So I'm going to start like that. And I'm going to chamfer basically all the way around this thing. Because that'll be easier to see how consistent I am if I can see a chamfer. If you start rounding right away, it's a little trickier to see what's going on. Just realizing I need to get these wedges a little more flush. So I just sharpened my chisel. You really want it sharp for this. To make this much easier. And I'm trying to keep the of course, the edge of the chisel from hitting here. I don't want to scratch that surface. I guess you could maybe put something there to protect it. So notice I'm coming this way. We have to kind of keep in mind the grain's going vertically. If I was to come in like this, that would be more like going against the grain, right? If I came in like that, it wouldn't work quite as well. Okay, so that looks symmetric that way. I want to do the ends now. I'm going to switch to a bevel up. Okay, so I've got the whole surface chamfered now. Now I'm going to, chamfer the chamfer, so to speak. So I'm going to come in, I guess, like this. I want to make sure every surface has a chisel cut on, otherwise it's a sawn surface, so it doesn't look the same. Okay, now I still have a little flat all the way around, so I'm going to put a little bit more of a chamfer just right at the bottom there. So this is the trickiest part here. Just want to get rid of a little more of that flat at the bottom. So I'm going to end up with essentially a bunch of little facets along here, but that actually looks pretty cool, I think. You can tell it's a hand-worked surface. Now I'm bleeding on my project here. Okay, a little bit of clean up there. I can kind of scrape right up to the corner there. There's a little bit of glue there. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Okay, I've got the bases together, the stretchers done, the tenons are trimmed. So last thing is to install the beam. Now it's held in with a couple of dowels, and we're going to drill the holes into the beam slightly off center so that it pulls the beam down into the notch here. So I've got this in position. I've used my square to make sure it's centered in there, and I'm going to use a centering pin, and I can never remember the name of these things. I could use the same drill bit that I used to drill the hole, a brad point bit, but this pin works just fine. So I'll just push that in, making sure that's down. And it's got a little point on the end of it that will mark that. And now I want to make sure before I take this out, okay, I can see the dimples there, but I want to mark where this came from because it has to go back in the same spot because these holes aren't in exactly the same location. So I'm going to put a little circle there and a circle there so I know which way that goes in. So we'll go to the drill press now and drill these holes. Okay, so I've darkened up my hole, that little dimple, a little bit. I want to drill the hole for the dowel slightly on, away from the bottom of where this is going to sit, right? If I drilled the hole down here, then I would be essentially installing this up above there. So I want to go just a little bit above there, not too far. This is not a big dowel. These aren't big parts. So I don't want to be bending that dowel too much. So I'm going to go maybe a 32nd or so above that spot. I've cut some 1/4 inch dowels to length. The length I need is roughly 2 inches. I cut these about 2.5, somewhere in that range. They need to be a little bit long. So what I'm going to do first is run them through a dowel sizing plate to make sure they're all right. So those are ready to go. Now they also, because they're going into a misaligned hole, so to speak, I need to taper the ends a little bit. So I've got a pencil sharpener here I'm going to use to taper these a little bit. I could sand them, that would work fine too. I'm going to go, well, whatever. The offset, right, it's only about a 32nd, so. All right, and then I want to wax these a little bit. Make them go in the hole a little easier. Okay, so I should be ready to install these now. I've got my mark on here that matches up with my mark on here. On the other one, I put 2 dots as opposed to 1 dot just to distinguish between the two. So I will line that up, and that looks good. Now I've got a drawbore pin. These are actually drawbore pegs, if you get the terminology right here. The drawbore pin, which is, I don't know, if you don't really have to use this particularly for such a small offset, but this kind of burnishes the hole. It's tapered. It also, because it goes through both holes, it kind of pulls things nice and tight. So I'm just going to run that in there and burnish the hole a little bit. And then I'll put this down so we can start pounding in the pegs. All right, I've got a peg here. I'm over a dog hole. And of course I want to make sure that's sitting flat. I don't want to be away from there right where I'm hitting. And that looks good. All right. I'm going to trim this flush. Last thing I'll do is trim or plane these flush. Oh, now I don't want to play in that direction. Come back this other way. There we go. All right, trestle horses are complete. I'm really liking these, particularly with the maple. The hand planing that maple really makes it almost glass smooth. So these really turned out nice. This is probably one of the nicest that I've made.